Well, maybe transition. And by the way, just a reminder for any of our attendees, if you have a question that you would like to ask, then please let me know. We've got some other questions I've got structured here, but you're more than welcome to throw a question in the chat if you'd like me to answer it. And if we can get to it, we certainly will. Talk about, the whole idea of on-shelf availability. You mentioned buy online, pick up in store. You mentioned Dr. Hargrave is a big one on ROPIS, which is research online, pick up in store. So people literally getting online and going, does that store have it? Does that have a store? Oh, that one has it. I'll go to that one, right? And being able to have enough confidence in your on hands to do that. But talk to me about the on-shelf availability, the implications of supply chain. Because if the store doesn't have it, you can't sell it. There's no way to sell it. So forget about the stuff happens inside the store. What are the opportunities that you see in terms of the role that supply chain will play in the future for making sure products available for the customer?
Okay, I will do that. I would also like to talk about the store at some point.
Absolutely.
But so when you look at the supply chain, there's so many variables that affect in stock at the store. Okay. Everyone jumps to transportation, and I'll talk about that. But there's a lot of others. For example, case pack quantity. Okay, you look at how do suppliers make case pack quantity decisions? Well, how many will fit on the shelf? I mean, fit on the pallet. How can we cube out the truck? What can our packaging equipment do? This is how case pack quantity decisions are made. But in reality, case pack often becomes the de facto store level replenishment quantity. Right. Not always, because you sometimes have interpacks and sometimes they do replenish in eaches, but many times the case pack becomes the multiple of order quantity at the store level. And I won't get into it right now. That has a huge impact. I've done studies on this. It has a huge impact on in-stock and inventory levels in the store. So you have a disconnect. I'm going to use this just as an example. You have a disconnect between a variable that really has a big impact on store level efficiency and how those decisions are made. Totally disconnected.
Great point.
But you can find those kinds of examples all over the place. Another example in transportation, you take something like intermodal. A lot of shippers don't want to use intermodal because the lead time is longer. In some cases, the lead time variability is longer, or I should say the lead time uncertainty is higher. Longer lead times and higher uncertainty in lead time leads to either more safety stock being required or more stockouts, or both. And but if you look at intermodal, the price is a lot lower. I mean, the freight rates are much better, especially on longer hauls. Now, on short hauls, that's not true, but on longer hauls, that's true. But a lot of times they're not. And yes, it is true. You might have to hold more safety stock, possibly.
Right.
That's not always a certainty. But maybe the cost difference is worth it, especially when you're in a situation where you have inflation. Maybe instead of making the quantity and the package smaller, like making it 10 ounces instead of 12 ounces for cereal or something like that, maybe we just need to switch to intermodal. This is just one simple example.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. Well, you mentioned you want to talk a little bit about the store, so let's go there. Let's take that example you just said. Most retailers will actually set their shelf holding capacity based upon the case pack, right? Not based upon what sells, but for example, I'm going to set this up so I know, let's say the case pack is 12. well, I'm going to set my case pack to 18 into my shelf capacity to 18 because I want a full case to fit on the shelf, and I want to be able to run down to 6 before I order the next one and deliver it, so the whole thing fits on the shelf. That's utopia, right? But is that the right level of shelf capacity for that item? Maybe not. Maybe it doesn't justify holding 18, but that's what you set it at because it's a case and a pack and a half. So that is certainly one issue. There are obviously other reasons as well. So you said you mentioned the store. Go ahead and give us your thoughts on what the store level implications of this are.
Yeah. So for one thing, I mean, right, if a supplier increases the case pack quantity, their sales to the retailer will increase for a time.
Yeah.
Right, because it will have to fill up the prime the pump, if you will, and so as the pump's being primed, you're going to see an increase in sales from the supplier's perspective, not from the retailer's perspective necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
You might, if the product is a impulse item, with impulse items, there is a relationship between demand and inventory level. The more you have, the more you sell. But for most items, you don't see that. And you take something like Similac, it's a destination item. It's not an impulse item. Many items in the store aren't. The other thing is that, if you look at different products by day of the week, some products sell more on the weekend or certain days of the week because of various reasons. And if you're setting your facings simply based on the case pack quantity, you might run out of some products, say on Saturday morning or Saturday by noon, where if you would have adjusted your shelf quantity to meet peak demand, you wouldn't be out of stock of that item. And you also have to remember, most items in the store are fairly slow movers in any store.
Yeah.
There's a few items that move like crazy, right? So for the ones that move really fast, it would be optimal from a store perspective to allocate more shelf space to them. And having bigger case pack quantities don't make sense. I mean, it might make sense.
Right.
But for slower moving items, like you take certain kinds of shampoo, which I never buy anymore.
Why?
And you take certain, you see, I don't know how many SKUs are in a typical store, but
hundreds.
It's like, what's that?
Hundreds.
Yeah, there's a lot of SKUs of shampoo, and you may need them for various reasons, so you don't lose shoppers. But you don't need a big case pack, right? You probably don't need more than one facing for those SKUs.
Yep.
The other problem with having large case pack quantities at some point when they get too big is if all the product doesn't fit on the shelf, then the case has to go back to the back room, and it often gets lost. And that's one of the benefits of RFID or a technology like that, is that if these retailers were using it properly, they would know where product is in the store, and the case pack quantity wouldn't be as big of a deal, but it still is. Even if you have RFID and you're using it properly, if your case pack's too big, then you're going to have multiple trips from the back room to the shelf, and then that increases your labor costs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Brian Grove just sent us a note. I'd love to have you kind of react to this. He says, in my honest opinion, longer lead times aren't an issue if service is consistent and you have a regular cadence of order generation, say once a week. Processes like dynamic distribution that delays the final score allocation to account for the point of sale forecast and variability. Agree, or do you want to have a little debate?
I will agree and disagree to some point.
Good.
I do agree. If demand is level,
meaning,
and then you're going to have good service, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
As uncertainty starts increasing, at some point, the longer lead times will have to result in more safety stock because, safety stock is a rough estimate. It's about equal to the amount of safety stock increase you have to use is about equal to the square root of the lead time. So it increases, but kind of at a decreasing rate. That's just a rough estimate. But I do agree. If you have good service, meaning your carriers are consistent, providing good service, and your demand isn't too uncertain, then yeah, you should be able to plan this.
Yeah.
It's a planning problem. So I agree with Brian.
Yeah, I think there's a couple more factors too, and I'm not sure this is an official industry term, but the terms I use a lot is switchability. Okay, so if I'm going in to the store for bread and they don't have exactly the bread I'm looking for, I'm leaving the store with bread, right? I'm not going to go home and go, oh, sorry, they didn't have bread. They didn't have any bread? Oh, they had 4 of the loaves, but you said you wanted this one. Well, buy another one. That's different than if I'm going in to buy a black printer cartridge for my HP printer and they have other printer cartridges. I can't switch. I got to find this one. And I think that's why you're finding RFID really taking off in the apparel and general merchandise, probably more so than dry grocery for that reason, because we've battled this, and this. We've battled this. We need to provide more assortment and opportunity for merchandise for our customers. And that's on one end of the pendulum, and then it swings all the way back. No, we need more holding capacity because we're running out of stock. And that game has been going probably since the first retail store, which is how do I offer the right level of assortment while maintaining my on-shelf availability for my customers? That's always a pendulum that goes back and forth amongst retailers. And I'm not sure that merchants who make those decisions are really thinking about it in that way about the supply chain implications. I think they're more about I need to offer more assortment to my customers, or I'm hearing a lot of problems with out of stocks on the shelves. How do we factor in really experts in the supply chain to these decisions that are being made between a buyer and a seller?
Let's get back to your switching concept.
Okay.
You're right. It's like if you want buttermilk biscuits and you go in there out and they have country biscuits, you might be okay.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If you're a new parent, you've got a baby, and you go in for Enfamil because that's what maybe they gave you in the
You're not switching.
hospital.
You're not switching.
Get in there and it's not available. You don't switch to Similac because a lot of times, or vice versa, not
right.
Names of the brands are irrelevant.
Right.
The point is that people aren't going to switch.
Great point. Yeah.
Very few people will. And you not only lose the basket, you could lose the customer in some cases if it happens too often.
Yep. 100%. Yeah. And the running joke I do is if you're in a Walmart store and you don't have your stuff, I'm going to go back to what we said. The customer is ultimately in control. They're going to get out their phone and they're going to use Walmart Wi-Fi to order it from one of the competitors. How about that for a double slap in the face? But they're going to make their choices because the customers ultimately go back to the first thing we said, that Doug said, there's not a lot of loyalty there. If they're going to get what they want, and if you don't give it to them, they'll find somebody who will, no problem. So Michael Hanka just gave me an interesting question. Seems like item velocity and the modular holding power may have a bigger impact at the shelf versus supply chain issues, especially with the shelf used for physical customer and digital customer. Your reaction to that?
I totally agree.
Okay.
I mean, we're always talking about transportation and warehousing, but the reality is the store is the place where you've got to get supply chain concepts integrated.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I definitely agree, and I don't think many retailers, you mentioned this earlier indirectly, but are in their merchandising decisions are really taking into account the supply chain variables.
Mm.
And it's true. holding capacity, even store processes, which have to be enabled by technology these days. They've got to be.
Yeah.
And then visibility. But yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of times retailers look at merchandising as an art. So if you look at omni-channel, for example, well, let me back up a second. If you look at retail media networks, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
This industry was about 40 billion in 2023, according to some numbers I have. Maybe it's not perfectly accurate, but that's roughly. And, it's still nascent, right? It's still a nascent form of media. But if you draw a straight line, it looks like it could be as much as, by 2026, 180 billion.
Wow.
Okay. And many suppliers out there don't know. There's 600 retail media networks out there. Walmart Connect is one of an example. Yep. If you look at Walmart Connect, right, you can advertise. If you're a supplier, you can advertise on their digital space. You can advertise on the app. You can advertise on the website. You can have a sponsored pay. You can have a brand page. There's all these different ways you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the store, you've got audio, you've got video, you've got, even at the self-check stand, there's a place where they advertise things right there.
Sure do.
But on top of that, they've partnered with a company to create a way where you can actually, as a supplier, also advertise on Walmart's social media, like Instagram or Facebook, things like that.
Yep.
And so what's happening is suppliers I'm surprised how many suppliers really still aren't very familiar with this, but how do they increase more spend? Do they take spend from their other media that they used to use and put more of it into retail media networks? This is going to have a big impact on demand, where demand comes from. And I think that merchants and suppliers need to be thinking a lot more about, how do we incorporate this? This information is quite available. Right. How do you incorporate that into your forecasts and into your supply chain planning, your network design? Mm-hmm. I don't think that's happening very much at this point. And it's gonna get bigger. It's gonna have more and more impact over time.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what do you think so it's now 2024. I mean, what are the big opportunities in the retail supply chain? I'm not going to say just supply chain. What are the big opportunities in your point of view in the retail supply chain? What are the things that we should be focused on?
We need to be focused on omni-channel. We could have a whole conversation about that, but if you have a store and you have all the omni-channel options, and it doesn't increase sales, then all you've done is increased uncertainty for every SKU. Okay. If it increases sales, you might have actually solved some problems through that, ignoring capacity constraints and things like that. But I really think understanding how the network designs need to change as a result of omni-channel is a huge opportunity that is being right now. People are saying, well, we need to change our network design a little bit, or we need to do this, that, or the other, maybe case pack quantities. I don't even know all these variables. But I think there's a lack of really using concepts that are well established in supply chain management and applying them to these kinds of questions for omni-channel and of course, retail media networks. Everyone in supply chain should be aware of retail media networks and be learning as much about them as possible. Yep. And then how your company's responding to these things. But the other thing is, Mike, I remember if you would have asked me back in 2005, would technology like RFID, as an example, be implemented and be being used by this point? I would have said, of course. by this point. Visibility is so important. And now that we have blockchain technology, the marginal benefit of visibility has gone up an order of magnitude from a supply chain perspective.
Right.
So I think it's going to take leadership from key players to roll this out and make this work.
Yep. Well, and just to build on that, and then we're going to kind of wrap this up. You know, I've spent 20 years in RFID. I've started up and shut down more RFID projects than I care to remember, but it's now taken place, right? Every major retailer is using it, but I would say 90% of the benefits today in retail are at the store. It's getting, you know, as Dr. Hargrave, it's getting to the on-hand accuracy of knowing what you have and where it's located. The opportunity, since all of this stuff, for the most part, is tagged at source by the manufacturer, tracking it through the supply chain and eliminating claims and duplication and product authentication, et cetera, are the big opportunities. And I think that's where RFID and blockchain will play. It's just really, really hard. I mean, the practitioners who are trying to do this, they're always challenged with that kind of thing. But we're going to get there. And I agree with you. I think knowing what you have and where is it located throughout the entire supply chain and the impact of omnichannel are clearly going to be big drivers for this.
I even think from a defense perspective.
Yeah, I think so too.
This kind of thing can thwart terrorist behavior and so forth.
Yeah, well outside of retail for sure. Dr. Waller, and we're a little bit over, but that's okay. What did I not ask you that I should have? What's on your mind? What's keeping you up at night? You know, what are the things that you think we ought to be thinking about as an industry?
Well, I think as an industry, and I'm talking broadly supply chain management, not just retail.
Yep.
We need to be really thinking about making sure that we have multiple ways to ship things, to store things, to forecast, because other big sources of uncertainty are heading our way. We just don't know what they are. There's other black swans out there.
Got it. Cool. Dr. Waller, as always, thank you so much. Thank you for all you do for the industry. Thank you for your leadership at the University of Arkansas. This isn't the first time we've talked. It won't be the last time we've talked. I enjoy working with you on these kind of things, and certainly we'll put your bio information in the podcast. So if anybody wants to reach out to you separately, but thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day, and I really do appreciate you joining us today.
It was absolutely my pleasure. I always enjoy visiting with you, and your background is so remarkable, being the first information systems type person on a supplier team here in Northwest Arkansas, and just all the things you've witnessed, and you're continuing to stay involved. So thank you for having me. Good talking to you.
All right. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.